Hi, today I'm going to have a guest. His name's Terrence Fitzgerald. He is my father, and we are going to be talking about the time period of the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s. So,
I can only cover the 70s and 80s. Maybe the 90s.
Okay. A question I would like to ask is, how has technology in cars developed over the period of the 1970s, 1980s, and today?
Oh my goodness. Well, in the 70s, we still had optional seatbelts, which is interesting. There was 8-track cassette players in cars, if you were wealthy enough to have an 8-track. Then in the 80s, cassette tapes came along. Late 80s, early 90s, that stupid automatic seatbelt that would strap you in, mostly in Toyotas, but I think a few American cars had those. And then CDs started coming into vogue, really in the 90s. And then from then on, we've gotten away from most of that, and now it's plug in your phone or connect it with Bluetooth to play tunes on your radio. I mean, anti-lock brakes were not normal, not standard. They're very atypical. Power steering was still an option back then. It was pretty crazy. You needed to have a Cadillac to have electric windows, right? Everything was carbureted, so you needed to learn the magic dance of how your car would handle the cold. Do you have to hit the gas once or twice before you tried to start it? But be careful, because you could flood it. Fuel injection made life so much easier when that came along. So anyway, next.
How has laws on smoking with children in vehicles have changed?
Oh my goodness. Well, I don't know about laws, though some states I guess now ban it, but when I was a kid, nobody cared. They'd be smoking with kids in the car with the windows up. I mean, just nobody cared. No car seats either, right? I mean, there were some early versions of them, but those things will kill you. You look at them, they're ridiculous. And we didn't wear seat belts. We just played around in the front seat. Parents, they didn't care. Your car would be blue. It looked like a Cheech and Chong movie when they opened the door. Yeah, nobody cared. It's a different time.
Have laws about pets changed very, very much since the 1970s and 1980s?
Well, I lived in a rural area, so we didn't have much in the way of pet ordinances. Honestly, I don't think that town does now, although a lot of towns have leash law requirements. But it was a lot like here, where, there was a dog license. There was such a thing, but nobody bothered. Everybody had strays. Who's going to pay the state for permission to have a dog? It's stupid. So, those laws existed. They were just ignored. Pretty much like they are here.
How have gathering laws, like social media and socialness, changed? How have they changed?
Well, there was no such thing as social media at the time. The closest thing you could get to is, having a party line phone, which I did have to have when I was a kid, and it was a rotary. So there was no social media. The closest you could get, I guess, is writing a letter to the editor in the local paper, and people seeing it, right? So that didn't really exist. People actually gathered together, like in real life. It's funny to see the evolution of gathering, because when I was a kid, houses were designed for gathering. There was big front porches. Everybody was ready to welcome a visitor. They'd come over to my grandparents' house all the time while I was there and play cards till 4 in the morning. Now, you don't tend to see as many big front porches, although they're starting to come back, but you started to evolve to private back decks, where the stranger or the visitor wasn't welcome. If somebody knocked on your door and you didn't expect them ahead of time, now you think that's weird. Back then, it was like, oh, who's come to visit? You know, just a different social mindset. People, even though they're more connected digitally than ever before, they're very much more isolated physically and socially than ever before. Yeah, it's a weird dichotomy.
What do you think are the pros and cons of having technology in the advancement from the 1970s and 1980s to the 2000s?
Oh, the pros. Oh, there's so many. I don't know if you could even list them all. I mean, we're recording this on a device that I carry on my hip that has more computing power than the space shuttle did. Way more. There's so much advancement. Your access to knowledge is vast. Although a lot of people don't access it, they like to just share idiotic memes and propagate myths. But yeah, the advancement of the availability of information is tremendous. You know, the digital book fad it has its advantages. You can have a very large library in a very small container, right? Although it's, you know, something nice about tactile holding a book. There's a lot of ups. I mean, treatments for disease, advancements in medical technologies. There's so many benefits. But the downside is there's now so many distractions. You're constantly bombarded with information from every direction and choices, like ridiculous amounts of choices, because of technology, that it's great that we have the luxury of the burden of too many choices, right? I mean, that's amazing. But it can make life very difficult. It can be hard to focus on any one thing. You're always pulled in 50 directions, and I think that makes people more grumpy. And maybe that's part of why they disconnect more. I don't know.
Do you think families should have technology? Like, even, yes, of course, there's mostly, like, most technology in houses are TVs and computers. But do you think they should have older technology, such as a Game Boy and stuff like that?
Huh. Wow. Yeah, Game Boys were advanced. I mean, they didn't come out until I was pretty much graduating high school. My first video game was that I bought at a yard sale in like 1979 was Pong. You know, you could switch for the player settings with actual physical switches, and you screwed the leads into the antenna adapter on the back of the television, and all it had for a controller was an up and down moving switch, so you could move your Pong line back and forth as it's boop 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 boop. You know, that was killer, right? So yeah, I can't say much about video games. God, I played that thing for countless hours. So yeah, of course it's not very violent, is it? Maybe you beat up constantly on a ball, but anyway, yeah, I'm not against having technology. It's just having the discipline to have it and not let it have you, which is very difficult because it is so entertaining and it does suck you in so easily, and there's so much you can do with it, but then you lose this.
Do you think gathering in big groups together and having fun should be done more often?
Well, not currently with the pandemic going on.
I know that.
Yeah, but yeah, there is value in gathering. I mean, I'm naturally an introvert. I'm not somebody that feels comfortable in large crowds. I'm somebody that's drained by being around a lot of people as opposed to others that are energized by it. So it's not something I do easily or something I'm very comfortable at, but there is benefit in it. We're a social species. I mean, we are. We're communal. We're tribal. We really are. And we gather. We make community. We make culture. We make cities. So yeah, we need to be together.
Do you think the advancement in the technology in a house, such as lights, for instance, that's brighting up this room, and stuff such as that, should be advanced in more? I mean, even though it's going to be, do you think it should be?
I think it's awesome. I mean, the concept of a light-emitting diode powering the light in my home, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, when I was a kid, we were still using Edison bulbs. Fluorescence kind of started to exist a little bit. Now you can have digital climate control that you can manage from your smartphone anywhere in the world that you have a Wi-Fi connection or data connection. You have Alexa and these other devices that are the early phases of fully automated homes, which is something Bill Gates piloted in his house a couple decades ago, but is now starting to get more commercially viable for the average Joe like you and me. These are excellent advancements. I mean, as much as we're using more energy, we're actually using less energy than we otherwise would have because of advancements like this and improvements in efficiencies. The only drawback is any of these systems that are connected through web or even Bluetooth can be hacked, and a lot of damage can be done. So there's risks, but there's some great benefits, and I'm all for it.
One last question for today. Do you think that the technology and advancement in a police society has helped with things such as catching the bad guys?
No. Well, has it helped in catching bad guys? Maybe. But it's also helped in catching a lot of people that aren't. The militarization of the police force is something that is really sad. If you look at cops today responding to a situation, you see them in military equipment, military gear, using military tactics, often people with a military background. And your community police are not supposed to be soldiers, right? And this kind of occupation mentality kind of feeds on ego, and it's not about protecting and serving as much as it is, look at me, I'm Big Billy Bat. And that's how you get a lot of abuses from police and a lot of corruption, which I know because I've been friends with cops and I've talked to them, and yes, they're very, very, very corrupt. Not everybody, but the ones that aren't, don't tell on the ones that are, which taints them too, right? So, yeah, I'm not for the militarization of the police force. There is, benefits to technology advancing and being able to apprehend somebody that's kidnapped a child across state lines and things like that. That's awesome. That's great. But more and more military technology in civilian police forces is not good.
Thank you for your time, and I hope you can have a good afternoon.
Yes. Thank you for interviewing me. Mwah.